So I'm chatting to Dr. Happy Sithole from the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, the CSIR, which is based in Pretoria. We're talking about Lengau, which is Africa's fastest computer. Thank you so much for joining me, Doctor.
Thank you, Balungile.
Well, so, I mean, this is a great innovation and a great solution. We often talk about problems that African countries are experiencing. So what was the motivation to develop Lengau, which is, known as a supercomputer, and when did the process begin?
Okay, first of all, I think looking at the development of high-performance computing or supercomputers in the country, it started off with the need to be able to address some of the challenges that we have as a country, and I would say as the continent. So the access to supercomputers to our researchers has always been there way before we started to build our own supercomputers. For an example, scientists like myself who did their degrees maybe in the 90s, I had to depend on other countries outside South Africa to have access to supercomputers. So this is where we started off. With all these needs from the community, the Department of Science and Technology was approached to say we need to have this capacity in the country. So there were a number of scientists working in different fields who required the supercomputers. So where we started is then it had to be an investment through the Department of Science and Technology, which started in 2007. So this is how we started off with the first supercomputers built in South Africa. Once the systems were built in the country, there was a huge demand from the users in the country. With that huge demand, then we had to grow from a supercomputer which was only 2.5 teraflops, having like 640 processors. We had to grow to a supercomputer that had about 61 teraflops with about 7,000 processors. And now, finally, in 2016, we have got a supercomputer that can do 783 teraflops, which has got over 24,000 processors. So the growth here has always been dictated to or guided by the amount of utilization from our users.
I mentioned before, this came out of a need which arose on the continent in terms of processing a massive amount of data. But can you talk about the stakeholders who have an interest in having a supercomputer like this existing? What kind of work is going through something that has such high processing speeds and also such massive amounts of memory and storage? What kind of data are we talking about here that's being processed by a supercomputer?
Yeah, first of all, I think the first people that we're looking at is our researchers at universities who work in fields like, for an example, in mineral processing environments. These people, for them to be able to understand the different materials or minerals, they need to be able to have a huge number of atoms built in their system so that they can be able to do a simulation of these systems closer to the reality. For an example, if I have to simulate the properties of gold, if I only do the simulation with 2 atoms of gold in my system, it won't be giving me the actual properties of gold. But if I do a system with closer to, say, for an example, 1,000 to couple of 10,000 of gold particles in my system, then the properties that I will be able to simulate will be closer to what gold is. So this is just in terms of the research. And for an example, if I take somebody who's working on the structural analysis or where we're looking at design of, let's say, motor cars. The systems that are used there are finite element analysis, and they look at the structure. And for you to be able to get a clear simulation of a car, it means that you have to have many parameters that you put in to do that simulation. And for that, your computing requirements keep on increasing. And closer to what a lot of people might understand is, for an example, the researchers who are working on, say, climate modeling or, say, weather prediction. Normally, when we do a weather prediction, it depends on how do you cut your grid or how do you look at the size of the problem that you are solving. Say, I am sitting in Pretoria, and between Pretoria and Johannesburg, we have got almost about 40 kilometers. And if a weather forecaster is going to look at what is the weather pattern between Pretoria and Johannesburg, and is going to look at it in an 80-kilometer radius, then that person is going to miss Joburg. You get my point. So it means that the person should be doing a forecasting on maybe about the 5-kilometer radius. And immediately when you do a 5-kilometer radius, it means that you get a lot of data for you to be able to do that weather prediction. So these are the type of things that you are looking at. And I can look at a lot of more other examples. But I think the other one that most of our users will be very clued up with is now the challenge that we are looking at on the square kilometer array. This is the big astronomy project that is taking place in South Africa and Australia, so basically in the southern hemisphere. So at the moment, we do have telescopes that collect data from the sky. We have got about 7 telescopes that are called the CAT-7 sitting in the Karoo. But for the SKA full production, we will need thousands of those telescopes. So already once these telescopes increase, there's a massive amount of data that will be collected that need to be processed. So I would say that the challenges in this case are varying from basic research, but also it goes into our industries. So for our industries also to be competitive. And I can talk about, for an example, in this case, on our financial markets. Everybody in the continent wants to know the performance of the financial markets. I think, Balungile, in this case, we might underestimate how much processing goes in before we will know what is the performance of the rand to the dollar. There's a lot of things that come in there. And for that to be able to be processed within a short space of time, we need massive computing to be able to estimate the financial markets. So this, I think are some examples that will be closer to most of the listeners.
Incredible. It's incredible. And so for me, what I deal with is a normal laptop, you know. So I'm just curious about, I mean, okay, we can't even compare the two. The supercomputer is so fast that you can't even compare it to, you know, like my computer where you know, we say gigahertz or gigabytes, you know. But I'm curious about what measures have been taken so that, you know, this supercomputer and similar supercomputers don't experience, you know, the typical thermodynamic issues like overheating or crashing due to maybe software or hardware errors like normal computers. What kind of engineering goes into that so that a massive system like this doesn't fail?
Absolutely. I think this is a very good question. If you look at your computer only, and I can take you back a little bit on history. Our computers initially had only one processor, which we call the central processing unit, or the CPU in most cases. So advancements in terms of the processing has taken place over years. And currently, you will be surprised that the laptop that you have there on your desk will be having more than 4 processors at least at this stage. So that's a massive improvement. So if you take as the laptop that you used to have in your 80s, you basically have got 4 laptops on your desk today. Wow. And that's massive computing capability now that you have. And I'm glad that you raised the issue of software, because today we have got this 4 desktops and we don't realize we still behave like in the 80s, where I keep on doing one process at a time. When I run my Word, I only run my Word, and then after that, then I will run my PowerPoint, and I will look at my email. But this computing power now that you have, it allows you to do all those things all at a time. You know that. Because in the past, if you are trying to run your Word and run your PowerPoint and read your email at the same time, your computer was going to crash.
Right.
Because it was only one processor that we had. But today you'll be amazed. I'm sitting in my office and I've got 3 screens in front of me. And all these screens are doing something on them, just on my desktop. So the power of supercomputing is exactly that. It is to allow you to do more than one processor or processes at a time. So if I'm just looking at my desktop with only 4 processors, imagine if I have got so many of this desktop laptops capability packed into a system that we call now a supercomputer. I pack them in a rack and I can have maybe about 100 of those or 1,000 of them. Then can you imagine how many things that I can be able to do? But the limitation in this is based on the capability of me being able to tell these laptops to work as a system all at the same time. And this is what we call to be able to parallelize, right? So we need to be able to do things in parallel and work things simultaneously. And that is the capability that we need on our applications. So the beauty of this is that we don't just need the hardware, but we need people to be able to build the software and software which are parallel. So currently with our supercomputer Lengau, as you have just indicated, it can do, in this case, 782 times 10 to the power 15 instructions per second.
Oh my goodness.
That's how fast it can do. As compared to your desktop, you correctly indicated it is only gigaflops that you have in front. This one is petaflops. So I think this is the...
And how do we do that measurement? So for many people who don't know, how would you measure a petaflop in relation to a gigaflop?
How do we measure that? They are all...
So what would be the conversion?
Yeah, first let's talk about the flop. What a flop is. F-L-O-P.
P, exactly.
It's this is a floating point operation. So the floating point operation is, if I give a computer an instruction, how many of those instructions can it do per second?
Right.
Hence we say flops. So it's floating point operations per second.
Yeah.
Right? So if we are given a task, I give a task to my desktop, and I also give a task to the supercomputer. That's what we do. So we have got a program that we provide to the computers, and we say to the computer, solve this problem. And we want to see how many instructions can both of you computers can do in a second. So for my laptop, because it's only it's measured in gigaflops, so it will only do maybe 10 to the 6 giga. It's about 10 to the 6 floating point operations per second, right? But this one will do 10 to the 15 at the same time. So they were given us the same problem.
Right.
If I have to put it in layman's term here,
please do.
Is if I give a task to one individual and I give the very same task to 6 individuals, and we measure on how much will they be able to complete in a second. One person who's working alone and those 6 people who are working together in parallel, they will be able to do more than one person. Do you get the analogy?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that is basically what is happening here. So this comparison, it will be now your laptop working alone and this supercomputer with about 1,000 of processors working together at the same time. Hence, you see that your laptop will only be able to do 10 to the 6 instructions per second, but the supercomputer will be able to do 10 to the 15 or even 10 to the 18 instructions per second. Balungile, this is what really defines competitiveness.
Right.
Because if you were going to look at, say, the examples that I gave you, analysis of the financial markets, me with my laptop, I will be waiting to find out about the rand dollar exchange and waiting for months just to get an answer. But Balungile, because she has got access to Lengau that can do 10 to the 15 instructions per second, Balungile will give this instruction to Lengau, and within few minutes, she will have an answer, and she will be able to go to the market faster than me. That's clear competitiveness. So basically, in terms of our economy, is that our industries, whenever they have got ideas, the only way they can be competitive is how fast do they take their ideas into products. Going fast into production, it gives you the first chance to go into the markets and you become competitive. So these things also help us to be able to be competitive in our industry. I will just give you one example,
Please.
that uses supercomputers for their industry. And if I talk about Germany, I guess you will think about auto manufacturing, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, like a BMW.
Absolutely. Do you know that how much computing goes into that BMW?
Yeah, I can imagine.
Just for the change of design, one has to be able to demonstrate how good is that design. So there's a lot of computing that goes in there. And we can see in terms of the design that comes from those areas. So I think this is one thing that most of the listeners will have a clue and just see how other nations becomes competitive.
I think this is incredible, and it's a big source of pride. You know, it's like you say, it's this kind of technology and innovation that gives you the edge and gives you the ability to be competitive. Because I mean, the world is a competitive place, so you need to step up to the plate and really be amongst those other big. You know, I mean, this has been described as the fastest computer that Africa has ever seen. You know. So it really does contribute a lot to making Africa, not just South Africa, but also Africa, you know, competitive. Is there anything that you maybe wanted to share with the listeners that I haven't asked you about? So we've spoken about speed, capacity. Let's talk about the name a little bit.
I think before even we get to the name, your remark here is that I think people should not misunderstand this as being the fastest computer in the continent to say only we want the speed in the computer. People should understand that there are real problems that South Africa and the continent would like to solve.
Yes.
For an example, in our exploration of our minerals, we really need to be able to be precise in those exploration. I think we're looking at our exploration on oil and gas. These things will require massive computing. And these are areas that will help us to be competitive as a continent. I'm looking at, for an example, on the square kilometer array, for an example that we just mentioned, for us to process that data and give the world processed information about the astronomy, we need to have massive computing. Our health systems, at the moment, we're talking about the genomic sequencing. These are the next generation on how people are going to be diagnosed and being given the right medication. So genomic sequencing is one of the areas that is going to revolutionize our healthcare. These things will depend on these supercomputers. So I think the listeners should be able to understand the impact that if we don't invest now in the skills and start addressing these problems, we are going to be left behind as the continent. So about our names, Every nations, when they build their supercomputers, they take pride on the symbols in their countries. And in South Africa, one thing that we looked at is that these supercomputers are huge and they are fast. So we sat and looked at this and said, what does this symbolize? And we thought about our antelopes. So our antelopes are huge, are agile, and they are fast. So our history in building the supercomputers, that's why we named our supercomputers after the antelopes. So the first supercomputer that we put in 2007 was Ikudu, which is Udu for the Xhosa language. And the second one, it was Tsesebe, and Tsesebe is also one of the first antelopes. So, but when we did Lengau, we found that Lengau is much faster. It's 15 times Tsesebe, which was our last antelope that we put.
Yeah.
But one thing, because of the architecture of the computing, this was now a smaller version of Tsesebe. And we thought, what will be so fast and getting smaller? And that's where Lengau, or a cheetah, came in. To say it is fast, but it has got a small footprint. So all these are some of the animals that we find in our continent, and this is what we take pride of. So this is how the naming convention comes in.
I'm so inspired, and I really appreciate that perspective that you shared in terms of not understanding Lengau as, like according to the headlines, the fastest computer, but really about the impact and what it comes down to and the change that it brings. I really, really appreciate that. But I also want to congratulate you as the team at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research for this incredible innovation. It's really, really important, and it speaks to the essence of what we do on this show. Like, what is shaking? Who is moving and shaking Africa? What is making an impact? What is making a change in terms of development? When we talk about the continent and many African countries, and talking about the problems that we face, and who out there is contributing to really, really tackling and solving these issues so that we come out better. So I am really, really inspired by this. I don't understand the science, but you explained it in an accessible way.
Thank you. I'm glad I managed to make it simpler for you.
Yes.
I think one last word that I would like to say is that this development it does not just end in South Africa. We have got a program where we are building these capabilities in the rest of the continent. We have been working with a number of our countries. First of all is the countries that are involved in the SKA. You know that it was South Africa and 8 partner countries from Africa, like Botswana, Mauritius, Kenya, Ghana, and so on. Those countries, we are busy working with them in building capacity there. So we get some high-performance computing systems that we install in this country. So basically, we don't want South Africa to be just a beacon sitting there alone. We want these things to be pervasive in the rest of the continent. So that's all what I can also share, that these developments, we want to see this being continent-wide.
100%. Thank you so much, Dr. Sithole. That was Dr. Happy Sithole from the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, who was just talking to us about Lengau, which has been described as Africa's fastest computer.